There have been many outstanding premierships ever since the beginning of Australian rules football over the years, but there's one that I doubt you have never heard of before, and that is the premiership that was won by a team that finished last, bottom of the ladder, wooden spooners, you name it. It was won by the worst team that season, and today I'll be going through the year, team, and their games to get to this historic victory. So let's take a look. The year was 1916, and at the time, World War I was still happening, and the year of 1916 was also the peak of World War I. And from that case, majority of VFL clubs were struggling to field teams that season, with many pulling out just before the beginning of the season. The number of clubs competing in the VFL competition at the time was down to just 4 clubs, which indeed was an all-time low for VFL AFL football. The clubs competing in the 1916 season would be none other than the Carlton Blues, Collingwood Magpies, Fitzroy Lions and Richmond Tigers. Now you're probably thinking right now, well, to finish last and win a flag from a 4-team competition, that's not really interesting, yet a great achievement, but more will be explained onwards. In the last season, 1915, there were 9 clubs competing, and the flag was indeed won by Carlton, who were also competing in this memorable 1916 season. 5 clubs, Essendon, Geelong, Melbourne, Richmond, South Melbourne and St Kilda, all could not field a team in the season due to player numbers. The season would run for just 12 rounds, with each team playing each other 4 times. Now, as well as another thing you're probably wondering is what team was it that won a premiership in 1916 finishing last? And it was indeed the Fitzroy Football Club, who the season before did really well finishing 3rd, also making the grand final, but then was knocked off by the Carlton Blues by 16 points. The Lions would have went into the 1916 season feeling very confident after making the grand final last year. Although they didn't win it, they would have went in with full confidence. Round 1 saw a grand final rematch between Fitzroy and Carlton at Princess Park. Carlton were red hot favourites going into this, seeing as they were last year's premiers, but in a shock twist, the Lions got a really hard fought and close 4-point victory over Carlton. Round 2, they returned to their former VFL venue at Fitzroy's home ground, at the time Brunswick Street Oval. It most likely wasn't a scrappy game or hard fought at all. Fitzroy shockingly again got the job done against Richmond by 29 points. Round 3 wasn't a win, but also wasn't a loss for the Maroon and Gold. Stayed to play Collingwood at Brunswick Street, and they played out for a draw 50 apiece. But when you're thinking about Fitzroy doing really good right now, things got worse for them right after that, losing 9 consecutive games. They played Carlton for the second time at home, once more going down by 33 points. Round 5, heading down to Punt Road to versus Richmond and getting flogged by 59. Then travelled to Victoria Park to take on the Magpies. A good fought game, but Fitzroy still losing by 14 points. Round 7, returned home and took on Carlton for the 3rd time now and lost by just 4 points, less than they did versing them last time, and that was 29 points to be exact. The week after was a 10-point loss to the Tigers at Punt Road again. They got really close, however, in round 9 to the likes of Collingwood and lost by just 1 point at Victoria Park. And then in that order again, versing the teams again for the final time, a 19-point loss to Carlton, another 10-point loss to Richmond, and then an 18-point loss to Collingwood. And at the end of the 1916 VFL season, the ladder looked like this. Carlton finishing on top with a record of 10 wins and 2 losses, one of those being to Fitzroy. Collingwood second with 6 wins, 5 losses and a draw. Richmond finishing a win and a half behind the Pies in 3rd, 5 wins and 7 losses. And then the team of this story, Fitzroy, a shocking 2 wins, 9 losses and a draw. But luckily for them, back then, the finals format was the top 4 play-in finals. They did not change it for the sake of there only being 4 clubs competing. They kept the 4-team finals, which means all teams can play finals, even finishing last. Finals in 1916 worked like this: first play 3rd and second play 4th. For the 1st and 3rd qualifying final, if you win, you go straight to the grand final, and if you lose, you'll play the winner of 2nd and 4th. The 2nd and 4th final is something more similar we have today for an elimination final. If you win, you play the loser of the qualifying final, but if you lose, you are eliminated. So let's take a look. Collingwood and Fitzroy played a week earlier than Carlton and Richmond. Don't know why that was necessary, but anyway. 9,690 people showed up for this game, and with the form that the Lions were in, there was no way they could win. The first quarter started with the Pies leading by 4 points, Collingwood 2-1-13 to Fitzroy 1-3-9. Unfortunately for Fitzroy, the second quarter lead started to build for Collingwood, as it was then a 9-point lead at half time. But after all that, the Lions redeemed themselves in the 3rd, kicking 4 goals 1 to Collingwood just 4 behinds, and with the form the Lions got in from that third quarter, they found themselves leading it by 13 points. A huge last quarter coming up, but from a close and hard-fought last quarter, the out-of-form Fitzroy Football Club pulled through and won it by a goal and got their third win of 1916. If Carlton were to beat Richmond, the Tigers would be eliminated. But if Carlton then beat Fitzroy the week after, Carlton would ultimately become premiers. However, if Richmond were to beat Carlton, the Blues would get a second chance and then they would play what should be Fitzroy. Gee, the final series back then was so confusing, but anyway, let's get back on track. It was said that Carlton led all game against Richmond and got the Chockies by only 3 points in a high-scoring game of VFL footy, 72 Richmond to 75 Carlton. And then it was set, first versus fourth, in a grand final. What could possibly go wrong? If Carlton win, they're premiers. If Fitzroy win, they play Carlton again next week in the official grand final. Let's have a look at the game. 15,500 people showed up for this game at the MCG, and they sure got an unexpected show to say the least. Going into this game, and what should have been expected as well, Carlton were heavy favourites from the public, expected to win this grand final. The first quarter saw a return to no-scoring Fitzroy, kicking 1 goal, 1 behind. But Carlton weren't 100% either, kicking 2 goals, 5 behinds. But quarter time saw Carlton lead it by 10 points. The second quarter saw Fitzroy improve, but became Carlton from the first quarter, kicking 2 goals, 5 behinds, and had a pretty inaccurate score of 3 goals and 6 behinds. While Carlton still hanging in there, this time by just 6 points, kicking 2 goals, 1 of their own. And the scoreboard shows 30-24 at half time. Now for the third quarter, in the turn of events, it was Fitzroy who outscored Carlton, but still it wasn't enough to take the lead at 3-quarter time. This time, Carlton's lead was shortened to 3 points. 5-10-40 Carlton plays Fitzroy 5-7-37. Massive last quarter in front of the small crowd at the MCG. But let's have a look and see what happens. Carlton in the last quarter lost all the momentum from the first half of the game, and after this, you can probably tell who won. Carlton kicking just 2 behinds in the last quarter to Fitzroy, saving all their power for the last quarter, kicking 4 goals 4 to run out unexpected winners by 23 points. To beat that Carlton outfit would have taken everything, and they've done a superb job to make it to the real grand final for 1916. "21,130 people went to this game, and they sure weren't disappointed. Fitzroy's entire season now sits at 4 wins, 1 draw and 9 losses. And Carlton's now is 11 wins and 3 losses. It's Fitzroy that have beaten them twice now. But without further ado, one of the biggest upsets in VFL AFL Grand Final history. The Dark Horses Fitzroy came out firing in the first quarter. Carlton were accurate as well, but that's only because they kicked 2 goals straight at quarter time. Fitzroy, 4 goals, 6 behinds, already leading it by 18 points. This underdog story continued throughout the second quarter as Fitzroy were even more accurate this time. Between the big sticks, they kicked 4 goals and just 2 behinds, and at half time they already had a score of 56. To Carlton, who had a slightly improved quarter, kicking 2 goals too, but they were still miles away from the run of Fitzroy. Half time, Carlton 4-2-26 to Fitzroy 8-8-56. The third quarter and truly the entire second half wasn't as impressive as the first half, but still both teams kicked 2 goals, but only by a single point. The Lions continued to outscore Carlton in these 3 quarters, and this game looks well and truly over now. But let's take a look at the final quarter of the 1916 VFL Grand Final. The Lions definitely did not have a great scoring last quarter, same as the one before, and the pressure was truly on them when they kicked just 2 goals, 1. Fitzroy's overall score was 12-13-85. Carlton in this last quarter would have had so much pressure all around, but they would have had belief to win this game, seeing as they are the benchmark of the 1916 season. But, of all odds, they still couldn't outscore the Fitzroy Lions, and what is arguably one of the biggest upsets in grand final history for VFL AFL football, the team that finished last with only 2 wins and a draw, beating the team that lost just 2 games and won about 10, the Fitzroy Lions made history on September 2nd, 1916.